Bethel, New York, August 1969. A musical disturbance that would shake generations is taking place, and many don't even know it. Richie Havens, Creedence Clearwater Revival, the Grateful Dead, and of course, Jimi Hendrix, took part in what may be the most monumental 3 days in American musical history. This is Woodstock. However, 40 miles northeast and 17 years earlier, in the actual town of Woodstock, New York, something needed to happen that would allow this Woodstock, the one in Bethel that is, to occur. It only took 4 minutes and 33 seconds, not 3 days. This is John Cage. A child well acquainted with the ridicule of being called a sissy and getting beaten up, Cage was often lonely. Noted for being a radical, the valedictorian graduated high school in 1928. He went on to study art and architecture, and later settled on studying music under Schoenberg at USC and UCLA. He became especially interested in prepared piano. His friend Robert Rauschenberg's white paintings, David Thoreau, and anechoic chambers, in which he could hear his own blood coursing through his veins, also served as major influences for Cage. After the premiere of his prepared piano cycle, Sonatas and Interludes, in 1949, the Times stated that the work was haunting and lovely, and Cage to be one of the country's finest. But this reputation would be forever altered just 3 short years later. On a warm August night in Woodstock, New York, 1952, in 433's debut, pianist David Tudor performs what will become Cage's best-known work. The only thing to assist Tudor is a stopwatch. He sets it first for 30 seconds, then for 2 minutes and 23 seconds, then for the remaining 40 seconds, reaching a total of 4 minutes and 33 seconds. Just like that, history is made, and the piece is complete without a single note being played. Although this may seem inoffensive enough, audiences were outraged. One local artist in the audience later responded, "Good people of Woodstock, let's drive these people out of town." How did this mild-mannered, fungus-loving sissy change the very conception of music with mere silence? Even Cage's own mother doubted him, asking fellow composer Earl Brown, "Now, Earl, don't you think that John has gone too far this time," when referring to 433? Despite the reception, the effects had already been set in motion. Even today, nearly 30 years after his death, Cage's work is still divisive. Some call it a hoax or an elaborate provocative joke, while others regard it as an act of avant-garde musical genius. But as for the artist himself, Cage's words carry a particular potency. He writes, "Listening to or merely thinking about 433 led composers to listen to phenomena that would have formerly been considered non-musical." This is the essence of 433. It questions the very definition of music, performance, and even art. That much is clear. In doing so, it redefines what is considered musical. Cage's own interpretation and expressed meaning are significant. He states, "There's no such thing as silence." After the first performance, he's also cited as saying, "You could hear the wind stirring outside during the first movement. During the second, raindrops began pattering on the roof, and during the third, people themselves made all kinds of interesting sounds as they talked or walked out." It's hard to imagine some of the potential incendiary comments to be part of the performance, but to Cage, it was all valid. Equipped with more hindsight and historical perspective, new meaning has surfaced for 433 in the meta-narrative of American history. In his biography of Cage, Begin Again, Kenneth Silverman states that, in a way, 433 is a tombstone for silence. Silverman also correctly emphasizes Cage's later obsession with Thoreau, who said, "Silence is the universal refuge." Perhaps, in the wake of war and a drastically changing world, it was time for the silence to take root and begin something new. With a new beginning often comes uncertainty. For 433, Cage's own words help clarify its meaning and significance, but still, questions remain. Of course, as Cage notes, the sounds of the environment that make up the symphony of 433 are unique each and every time, but still more can be said of 433. It's worth considering what else may be included in the soundscape. When does it actually begin, and how do you know it's actually over? Are your own thoughts included in the score of 433? In that case, who might be considered the actual performer? The audience, the pianist, or both? Any number of questions may be valid, but they all serve to emphasize the function of Cage's work: framing, In taking silence and using it to magnify subtleties in the world around the listener, both internally and externally, Cage is able to frame what would otherwise be mundane in such a way that it becomes art. He commands attention through his work to act as the artistic frame for things that already exist, which can deceptively make it seem as if Cage isn't making any positive statements. Although 433 may initially appear to be solely an act of negative space, it is perhaps more accurately a positive statement that is framing the world around the listener. Additionally, sitting in the deafening silence of a performance of 433 can be excruciating. The cognitive and auditory noise contributes to the experience of 433, but so does the feeling or emotional experience. Cage is able to frame an experience in which the listener may or may not be part of the performance as a song, challenging the meaning of art and music itself. So, although you may not have gone out of your way to listen to 433 before, you almost certainly have heard it, whether it be over dinner, during a test, or while waiting in line. In fact, each time you've listened, it has been entirely unique. While people could say any number of things about John Cage, he made irrevocable contributions to the conception of music and art that challenge us even 30 years after his death, and 70 years after the initial performance of 433. It may be a bit ironic, if not cruel, that a composer is most known for the time he spent cultivating quote-unquote silence, which he didn't even believe existed. But Cage did more than cultivate silence. He crafted a frame through which we can view and make sense of ourselves and the world around us with intentionality and boldness. So, while today a world of overstimulation and constant feedback reign, and history may remember the echoes of Woodstock, which actually took place in Bethel, New York, the commanding silence of 433 still stands, challenging our conception of art, music, and performance.